Timberwolves fans, we've got two big stories to talk about today. And honestly, they both point straight at the same uncomfortable question hanging over Minnesota right now. This team has championship expectations. The West isn't giving anybody room to breathe. And there's still one part of this roster that just doesn't feel completely settled. First, there's a fascinating situation developing around Minnesota's roster. The Wolves clearly have a position they need to strengthen, but solving that problem could come at a price that I really don't think they should be willing to pay. When you've spent this much time building a contender, sometimes the worst move you can make is creating another weakness just to fix the one everybody can see. And then we've got our second story, and this one might be even more frustrating. Because Minnesota apparently has its eyes on a potential solution, but there's a major obstacle standing in the way. The interest is there. The fit makes sense. The need is obvious. But when you see what it could actually take to make this happen, you'll understand why this situation is getting complicated fast. So yeah, we've got a lot to get into today. And before we do, if you love talking Timberwolves basketball every single day, hit that like button and subscribe. I'm Henry, and this channel is still new, so our first goal is getting this community to 100 subscribers. But seriously, only subscribe if you're a real Wolves fan and you want to be able to say you were here from the beginning. Now, let's get into this, because these two stories could tell us a lot about what Minnesota does next. Alright, Wolves fans, let's start with that first story. Because this is where Minnesota has to be really careful not to solve one problem by creating another one. The biggest concern on this roster right now is pretty obvious. Power forward depth. Minnesota has been one of the best teams in the Western Conference over the last few years. We've watched this team win at least one playoff series in 3 straight seasons. Before last season's second-round exit, the Timberwolves had reached the Western Conference Finals in back-to-back years. That's not a rebuilding team. That's not a team trying to figure out whether it belongs. That's a team knocking on the door. But the frustrating part is that Minnesota still hasn't kicked that door down and reached the NBA Finals. And it feels like every season there's one weakness somewhere on the roster that eventually becomes impossible to ignore. Last season, injuries obviously played a major role in how everything ended, but point guard was also a problem for most of the year. Minnesota just didn't have enough depth there. That meant an aging Mike Conley had a lot on his shoulders. And it also forced guys like Anthony Edwards and Dante DiVincenzo, who aren't natural lead point guards, to spend time running the offense. Now that situation looks completely different. Minnesota made one of the biggest moves of the offseason by trading for LaMelo Ball and putting LaMelo next to Anthony Edwards. Gives this team a backcourt that, at least on paper, can be absolutely terrifying. You've got LaMelo's playmaking and creativity with the ball, and then you've got Ant's explosiveness, athleticism, and ability to attack the basket. But it doesn't stop there, because Minnesota also committed serious money to Ayo Dosunmu signed a 5-year deal worth $112 million. That matters here. You don't make that kind of commitment to somebody unless you believe he's an important part of what you're building. And Minnesota's guard depth suddenly goes beyond LaMelo Ant and Ayo. Bones Highland has shown that he can give this team legitimate rotation minutes. And rookie shooting guard Isaiah Evans was viewed as one of the steals of the 2026 NBA draft. So, the weakness Minnesota had in the backcourt has suddenly turned into one of the deepest areas of this roster. And that's exactly why I don't want to hear about trading Ayo Dosunmu just because the Wolves need another power forward. I understand why the conversation exists. I really do, because Minnesota paid a price to build this guard depth, and that price was losing bodies in the front court. Julius Randle was traded away this offseason. Nez Reid followed him out the door. And losing those two completely changes the makeup of this roster. Now, Jaden McDaniels could be asked to move up and play starting power forward. And look, I trust Jaden. We know what he brings defensively. We know how valuable his versatility is. But behind him, that's where I start getting nervous. You have Trey Lyles. And then you're potentially talking about leaning on players who are predominantly small forwards or still relatively unproven in those roles, including Jalen Clark, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Josh Green. For a normal team, maybe you live with that. But the Timberwolves aren't trying to have a normal season. They're trying to win a championship. That lack of true power forwards was even part of the reason Minnesota got involved in the LeBron James sweepstakes. And of course, Wolves fans know how that ended. LeBron chose the Philadelphia 76ers, leaving Minnesota still searching for an answer at the 4. But here's where I agree completely with the argument Bailey Bassett made about this situation. Trading Ayo Dosunmu to fix that problem doesn't make sense. Think about what Ayo actually gave Minnesota. He averaged 14.4 points per game last season while shooting 41.4% from 3. And when the playoffs arrived, he didn't disappear. He actually became an important part of Minnesota's postseason run and played a major role in the Wolves getting past the Denver Nuggets. That matters to me, because we've spent years talking about finding players around Anthony Edwards who can defend, play multiple roles, and knock down shots. Now, Minnesota has one of those guys. They just gave him a 5-year contract, and we're supposed to immediately start thinking about using him as trade ammunition. No, not unless the return is something you simply cannot refuse. The Wolves absolutely should explore the market for another power forward. I'm not arguing against that at all. They need help there, but you don't have to panic. Jaden McDaniels is capable of handling that position right now, and small ball basketball hasn't suddenly stopped working in the NBA. More importantly, think about the basketball fit around LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards. LaMelo is going to create opportunities. Ant is going to collapse defenses. When those two guys are attacking and putting pressure on opponents, you need players around them who can punish defenses for helping. Ayo Dosunmu can do that. He gives Minnesota versatility, athleticism, and three-point shooting. So from my perspective, Ayo shouldn't be going anywhere anytime soon. And that brings us perfectly into our second story. Because if Minnesota wants another power forward without sacrificing someone like Dosunmu, there is another name sitting out there who makes a lot of sense. Jonathan Kuminga, and yes, the Timberwolves are reportedly interested. According to Michael Scotto of Hoops, Kuminga has drawn interest from the Minnesota Timberwolves, Cleveland Cavaliers, and Los Angeles Lakers. The Atlanta Hawks are also exploring the possibility of bringing him back after declining his team option for next season, which made Kuminga an unrestricted free agent. So there is competition here. And for Minnesota, Kuminga is an interesting target because he directly addresses what we were just talking about. After moving Julius Randle and Nez Reid, the Wolves need somebody who can play power forward. Kuminga can do that, even if he is slightly undersized for the position. But now we get to the bad news. John Kravchinski of The Athletic confirmed that Minnesota is interested in Kuminga, but he also explained why actually getting him to the Timberwolves is going to be extremely difficult. According to Kravchinski, when a player becomes available at a position Minnesota needs, of course the Wolves are going to investigate it. The problem is money. Kravchinski explained that Minnesota essentially only has a minimum offer it can realistically extend to Kuminga in this situation. And Kuminga's camp has made it clear to interested teams that he wants a significant contract. And that's the wall Minnesota keeps running into here. Michael Scotto also reported that the Timberwolves still have a taxpayer mid-level exception worth $6.06 million available. But Kuminga is reportedly looking for something in the neighborhood of $15 to $20 million per season. That's not a small gap. We're not talking about Minnesota being $1 or $2 million away. If Kuminga and his representatives are holding firm around that number, it becomes really difficult to see how the Wolves make this work under their current financial circumstances. And that's frustrating because the basketball idea itself is intriguing. Kuminga is still a talented player. Last year was a strange season for him. After a long summer, he signed a 2-year extension worth $48.5 million with the Golden State Warriors. He started the first 12 games of the season, but an injury and another change in the rotation eventually sent him back to the bench. And once again, it felt like Steve Kerr's trust in Kuminga disappeared. He played only 8 more games for Golden State before the Warriors eventually traded him to the Atlanta Hawks at the deadline. Golden State sent Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield to Atlanta and received Kristaps Porzingis in return. And once Kuminga got to Atlanta, we saw flashes of the talent that made Warriors owner Joe Lacob so excited about him when he entered the league back in 2021. In 16 games with the Hawks, Kuminga averaged 12.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 2.1 assists. Then he raised his scoring a little in the postseason. Against the New York Knicks in the first round, Kuminga averaged 13.7 points per game. And he played a part in Atlanta taking a 2-1 series lead before the Knicks completely turned things around, caught fire, and eventually went on their championship run. So, when you look at the player, the age, the athleticism, and Minnesota's need at power forward, I understand the interest completely. Put Jonathan Kuminga around LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards, and there are some really fun possibilities there. You could play fast, you could get extremely athletic, you could attack the rim relentlessly, and depending on the lineup, you could potentially switch a lot defensively and create some uncomfortable matchups. But none of that matters if the financial reality makes a deal impossible. And right now, that's where we are. Minnesota can be interested. Kuminga can make basketball sense. The Wolves can call his representatives and explore every possibility available to them. But if he wants $15 to $20 million per year and Minnesota's realistic spending power is around the minimum, or that $6.06 million taxpayer mid-level exception, somebody has to make a major compromise for this to happen. And I don't know why Kuminga would immediately do that when Cleveland, Lakers, and potentially Atlanta are also in the picture. That's why these two stories really connect for me. The Wolves have a legitimate problem at power forward. Everybody can see it. Julius Randle is gone. Nez Reid is gone. Jaden McDaniels can move up and handle minutes at the 4. Trey Lyles can help, and Minnesota can experiment with Jalen Clark, Terrence Shannon Jr., and Josh Green. But if this team seriously believes it can get through the West and reach the NBA Finals, I still think another reliable frontcourt piece would make me feel a whole lot better. The key is not becoming desperate. Don't create another hole to fill this one. Ayo Dosunmu just averaged 14.4 points while shooting over 41% from 3. He helped you in the playoffs. You gave him $112 million over 5 years for a reason. Keep that guard depth around LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards. And if Jonathan Kuminga becomes available at a number Minnesota can realistically afford, then, absolutely. You make that phone call and see what can be done. But right now, based on what John Kravchinsky and Michael Scotto are reporting, that financial gap is extremely difficult to ignore. And this is where the front office is going to have to be patient. Because Wolves fans have waited long enough to see this team get this close. Back-to-back Western Conference Finals appearances followed by another season with a playoff series victory have changed the expectations around this franchise. Making the playoffs isn't enough anymore. Winning one round isn't enough anymore. This is about reaching the NBA Finals and giving Anthony Edwards a legitimate chance to bring a championship to Minnesota. And when you're that close, every roster decision becomes magnified. One bad trade can hurt you. One panic move can destroy your depth. But one smart addition at the right time could also be the move that finally pushes this team over the top. That's why I'm watching this power forward situation so closely. I want another piece. I think Minnesota needs another piece. But I'm not sacrificing Ayo Dosunmu just because we're uncomfortable with the depth chart in August. And I'm not pretending Jonathan Kuminga is coming here when the money currently looks this difficult. Be aggressive, but be smart. That's what I want from this front office. Because with LaMelo Ball and Anthony Edwards leading this backcourt, there is way too much talent here to waste this opportunity. Now, I want to hear from you guys. Would you consider trading Ayo Dosunmu if the right power forward became available? Or is Ayo completely off limits for you? And what about Jonathan Kuminga? If you were running the Wolves, how hard would you push to find a way to bring him to Minnesota? Drop your opinion in the comments because I really want to see where Wolves fans stand on both of these situations. And if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. The channel is still new, and we're trying to build our first real community of Timberwolves fans and reach 100 subscribers. But like I said before, subscribe only if you genuinely believe in the future of this team and want to be part of this community from the beginning. I'm Henry, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Go Wolves!